Hello, and a very special welcome to the first episode of the Feet on the Soil podcast. This episode's obviously going to be a bit different to the rest of the episodes. It's mainly going to be just an introduction to myself, and then also to the concepts of this podcast and what it's going to be. I'm going to start with an introduction to myself. I feel like it's kind of easier to understand the podcast if you understand who's doing it. So, my name is Craig. I'm 24 as of about a week ago now, and I've always had an interest in nature. Nature and the environment have been a huge part of my life. I was lucky enough to grow up in the Dublin Mountains, so the northernmost part of the Wicklow Mountains National Park. I went to school here, all my friends are from here, and I eventually lived here. Because of this, I spent most of my time kind of running around up in the hills, chasing frogs and, walking through the river, all the kind of romanticist kind of views of the place. But I loved it. I was always outside as a kid, running around and exploring and having adventures out in the valley. I think everybody's like that. Everybody when they're a child has this kind of want to be wild and to get away from the buildings and the kind of controlled stuff. And then of course you kind of get older and that kind of goes from you. For me, I got really into video games when I was like a kind of teenager and just before I was a teenager. And the one that I really got into was Minecraft. This was kind of 2011 up to 2014, 2015, so like the real heyday of Minecraft. But I always kind of played it a bit different, so I wasn't really into the mining and the fighting monsters and all that. Like I never actually even completed the game. I never made it to the end other than in creative mode. What I really liked doing, and it's really nerdy, but I really liked creating worlds there was a program called World Painter, and it was essentially like a 3D modeling software, but you were modeling your own Minecraft world. And I used to be obsessed with, I would watch YouTube videos on my own, in my room, on my little iPod Touch. I would watch YouTube videos about geology and river erosion and weathering and all of these processes just so that I could make my world look as realistic as possible. I would even obsessively look for 3D models of trees that looked like the ones around me so that I could make it look like the forests that were around me. And I loved it. And even when I would finish the worlds, I wouldn't go in and play on them. I'd maybe build like 2 houses or something, and then I would just walk around on the world that I made. And then I would walk around outside and try and see how I could make my Minecraft world look more like outside. It was really weird, but that's what I loved. I loved exploring, but for some reason I preferred doing it in Minecraft than in real life. As I got older then, got to kind of 17, 18, I started getting really into just walking. So I live right beside these 2 beautiful lakes, and so I used to just go out and just walk around them for hours. And at this point I really had no idea about, ecology or botany or, birds or anything. I just liked going out and seeing what was there. So if there was deer, I kind of liked knowing where they were and at what time of year. So I used to kind of take a mental note of that and check it again the next time. And there were certain trees that I knew when they were going to kind of start blooming. There was areas that I knew looked better at certain times. And at that point I had a really big interest in photography. So I would go out with my camera, and that is what really made me start looking. So up until that point, I was just taking in, that's a cool forest, that's a nice river. But once I started photographing, I started looking for all the little tiny things. So seeing the lichen on a rock and photographing that, or the texture of the bark of an oak tree or a birch or a beech or whatever it might be. And I was studying photography, and that's what I really loved. But I had a kind of a a realization at some point that what I really wanted to do was work with the land. So I switched. I started a course in horticulture. I thought what I wanted to do was to be a gardener. And I have to say, I absolutely loved my course in horticulture. It was during COVID, so you couldn't be in a classroom. And I had a fantastic lecturer, and her solution to that was we just went to different gardens all around the kind of east of Ireland, mostly Dublin. But we went to these beautiful gardens, and that really changed things as well. I kind of quickly realised gardening isn't the way I wanted to go about it. That to me was just another way of kind of taming the environment. The thing that really had my interest was nature regeneration. So whether that be bog rewetting, rewilding of certain areas, river course restoration, anything like that, I just got obsessed with. I was watching YouTube videos constantly about it, picking up books all the time, trying to learn the history of this topic as well, the history of rewilding and kind of the relationship between people and the wilderness, and more so than just plants. And because of that, I finished up my horticulture course and I went into a course in environmental management with the hopes of becoming an ecologist. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just finished my second year and I'm hugely enjoying it. I'm learning constantly, both in college and out. I'm trying to educate myself as much as possible. I've also been lucky enough to get a job that is in nature education, and so helping to educate mostly kids about different aspects of the environment, which is incredible. I love it. And that kind of leads me on to the concept of this podcast and the reason why I want to do it. I'm absolutely surrounded by people who know far much more about this than I do. And whenever I'm talking to these people, I'm just thinking to myself, God, I wish I could record this and listen back and really learn everything they're telling me. And I'm sure as well, the stuff that they're telling me is worth listening for most people. We all rely so much on the land and on nature nowadays, and since the start of time. I don't think it's controversial at all to say that people have never been more disconnected from nature than they are nowadays. I know that's a really common speaking point, especially in this kind of circle of people who are into nature, but we are, and we're so reliant on it that I think it's a shame that most people don't know just how amazing it is. And that's what I'm thinking when I'm talking to these people. So I decided that I would really like to record it. Even if it was just for my own personal listening, I just wanted to kind of capture this and archive it. I suppose that's the photographer in me, wanting to kind of capture everything. And that's the main thing. I do want to do solo episodes where I kind of talk about things that I'm interested in and topics that I've kind of researched pretty heavily and really, really want to help spread the message of. At the moment I'm really obsessed with bats, so expect a bat episode pretty soon. But the main thing is going to be the guests. I think there's a lot of people out there with a microphone and a bit of extra time who are more than willing to put their opinions on the internet. And even though I'm one of those people, and I'll stick my hands in the air straight away and say that I am one of those people, I really want to put a focus on the guests on this podcast. I'm going to try and get as many interesting people together as possible, create conversations, and just try and make a platform for everything nature. I think it's really easy. A lot of people get into nature and they see the huge rewilding projects in Scotland or in Eastern Europe, and they're amazing. You know, the megafauna, the big sweeping landscapes, they are really eye-catching. But when I'm talking to people and it's someone who is studying a really specific moss found in one forested area in Killarney, or someone looking for lichens in one river valley in Louth. I think that's the really interesting stuff, and they're the people I really want to talk to. I'll definitely be talking about those big rewilding projects and huge successes that we see around the world. But those tiny little details are the things that I think deserve the most kind of pushing. Really to get people to appreciate every little bit of nature and not just, the big thing, seeing the forest for the trees. I also want this podcast to serve as kind of a grounding experience. So, like I said, I'm big into the barefoot running. I don't go out with my bare feet. I have barefoot shoes, but I like to, whenever I can, get out into the garden with the bare feet and kind of have that bit of grounding. It's a bit woo-woo and hippie, but I definitely recommend it. I feel a benefit off it. I don't know if it's placebo, but I definitely do. And if I'm walking around a park or anything, I'll try and brush off the trees with my hand and get a bit of that grounding. I want this podcast to be kind of like that. So if you're in the office or you're stuck in traffic or you're on a train, you can put this podcast on, learn a little bit about nature, and, merely imagine yourself out in the landscapes that we're going to be talking about here. So that's it. I think the next episode is going to be a little solo episode, just delving into a specific topic, something that's, good to get us started with. But then we'll be straight into guests, and I think that's going to be the really exciting stuff. So I'm really looking forward to it. I hope some of you are. And thank you very much for listening.